Hello, everyone. This is Sean from the Soccer Nostalgia blog. I have the pleasure to interview Welsh football fan Mr. Gareth Hughes. This interview is separate from a podcast series. This video interview will serve as a companion piece to a written blog presentation on Wales during the 1982 World Cup qualifiers. Hello, Gareth. Welcome back.
Morning, Shahan. Thank you very much for having me again.
Can you describe the state of the affairs with the Welsh national team in the spring of 1980 ahead of the 1982 World Cup qualifiers?
I'd say overall we were in pretty reasonable condition. We did have quite a lot of players, an awful lot of players actually playing in the old First Division, which is now the Premiership. If we go back as early as 1976, we actually qualified for the Euros, but unfortunately those days there was only four teams, so the group winners played each other, and unfortunately we got knocked out in the quarters. In 78, we lost to a controversial match against Scotland at Anfield, so that was one of many near misses in my time. The 1980 Euros, we never looked like qualifying out of a group that unfortunately contained an exceptional West German team who went on to win it. But going into 82, I'd say we were in pretty good condition because we got a lot of established internationals by then, and we were quite optimistic about making, well, we knew we'd make a good fist of the group. So there's a lot of optimism in terms of getting to Spain in 1982. So, yeah, there's good feeling around the country.
Can you describe the trajectory of new Welsh manager Mike England, who was appointed in March 1980 as a player and as a coach up to this point?
Mike England, he had a stellar playing career. He played for many years at Blackburn Rovers before he had his big money move to Tottenham Hotspur, and he captained a very, very good Tottenham Hotspur team who probably had them in their most successful era in the 60s and 70s. So he had a stellar playing career. After his playing career, he went over to the United States to play and coach. And then, as you said, he got the Welsh job in March of 1980. There probably weren't an awful lot of candidates back then to take over the Welsh job from Mike Smith. John Toshak was probably still early to midway through his tenure at Swansea, and he was doing exceptional things there. So probably Mike England was one of the obvious choices for the job. And there was, yeah, I think everyone in Wales was happy with that appointment due to the playing career he had and the service he gave to Welsh football.
Wales had failed to qualify to the finals of a major tournament since the 1958 World Cup. Was there any indication that it might be different this time?
Yeah, I think so because we had a lot of experienced players, but we also had a lot of players around the mid-20s who were coming into their prime years, really. And then we had some good youngsters coming through, like Ian Rush. This was probably a campaign before he did become a regular. Kevin Ratcliffe was starting to make his name in Welsh football, as was Peter Nicholas. And then we had some experienced players like Leighton Phillips, Di Davis, Leighton James, and some guy there who were sort of the older heads in the team, Terry Yorth, I could throw into that too, had all pretty much been there, seen it, done it with regards to Welsh football and in their playing careers. We had people like Mickey Thomas, Brian Flynn, Carl Harris coming into their prime. And then we had some young lads like Ian Walsh, who was our main forward at that time, Robbie James, Leighton James, another experienced player, Alan Curtis. So we had an awful lot of strength in depth as well. So there's a lot of positivity around Wales at that time. So age-wise, I think the side was quite well balanced, and also, like I said, we had an awful lot of experienced players, good players coming through. So it was a nice balance, and we are very optimistic going into the qualifiers for the 1982 World Cup. And also, we just come off the back of a very, very good win against England, where we famously beat them 4-1 at the racecourse in the home nations. So confidence was sky high going into that group.
As you mentioned, during this home championship of 1980, that's the very famous win over England 4-1 on May 17th.
That's right.
That was followed by a loss to Scotland 1-0 and also another loss against Northern
Northern
Ireland.
Ireland.
But
Yeah.
it's the win against England that's remained in memory.
It is,
It was
yes. I
such a
think it was.
significant win at the time. I remember, yeah.
Yeah, and I think the two defeats against Northern and Scotland almost didn't matter. Such was their beating we gave England, and although we were held by two own goals, it was an exceptional performance. And yeah, so obviously that lifted confidence just that little bit more as well.
Wales were in a group with the Soviet Union, Czechoslovakia, Iceland, and Turkey. The first two nations mentioned were regular qualifiers to tournaments. But as you mentioned, there was this belief that Wales might just sneak in for one of the qualifying spots.
Yeah, we're going into the group. We felt it was a level playing field because the Soviet Union actually hadn't qualified for anything, 'cause hadn't qualified for a World Cup since Mexico 1970, although they were regular fit qualifiers and had a very good record in the European Championships. So we felt on from that front it was quite a level playing field, and we had a good group of players going into that campaign as well. In terms of the history between ourselves, the Soviet Union and Czechoslovakia, in terms of success, there was no real comparison. But going into this group, we felt it's quite a level playing field because all sides are probably a bit of an unknown quantity to each other due to the political situations in the likes of Czechoslovakia and the Soviet Union. We probably didn't know an awful lot about their players, and likewise, they probably wouldn't know much about our players. We felt optimistic getting one of the two top spots. We probably felt the Soviet Union were going to be the team to beat because the side's built around a very good Dynamo Tbilisi team who'd getting quite a bit of success in Europe and they'd beaten some of Britain's best sides as well. Going on to that success, as had likes of Dynamo Kiev with Ole Blocking leading their team. So we knew they'd be the team to beat, and Czechoslovakia were going through a bit of a rebuild with not many left from the 1976 Euros. Yeah, so we probably didn't know an awful lot about them. But as I said, they probably didn't know an awful lot about us. So logistically, it's going to be a tricky group because you with Iceland and Soviet Union, Turkey, you're literally going from one end of Europe to the other. But like I said, confidence was sky high going into the group, and so we proved at the start of the campaign.
You already mentioned Ian Rush. The 18-year-old made his debut in the 1980 home championship against Scotland. Was it self-evident at this point that he was going to be some special player?
Well, we all knew about his talent. He'd come off he had a pretty good goal scoring record for Chester in the old third division, and which is now League One. So obviously he got his big money move to Liverpool off the back of that. But he's probably third or fourth in the pecking order at Liverpool at that time, with likes of David Johnson, David Fairclough, Kenny Dalglish ahead of him. But we knew he was a talent, but whether he's going to make the breakthrough at Liverpool was another thing. But obviously he did not long after that. So, but we did have quite an established attack at that time, so there probably wasn't quite an opening for Rushy to get to be blooded that bit younger with the Welsh team. But at that time, he was just a name to keep an eye on, a bit like what Gareth Bale was like in his early years with Wales. And obviously both went on to have stellar playing careers.
How old were you yourself as these qualifiers rolled around?
Well, the first game against Iceland was in May, so it was very early in the qualifying campaign. It probably would have been one of the very first games in the European qualifying campaigns because it was the back end of 79-80, so it had been coming up to 7 then. So I remember hearing the results on the radio when I came home from school, and then I vaguely remember staying up late to watch the highlights basically on the Welsh news. But yeah, it was certainly a very impressive start. So I was coming up to 7, yeah.
Let's start with the qualifiers. The first match was against Iceland, as you mentioned, at the tail end of the 1979-80 season. It's on June 2nd, and it's the first away trip as well. It's at
That's right, yeah.
Reykjavik. For this match on June 2nd, Wales came away with a comfortable away win, 4-0. Ian Walsh scored twice,
Yeah,
44th minute, 74th minute. Davy Giles scored in the 54th minute, and Brian Flynn
then,
scored
yeah.
a penalty kick in the 60th minute. We have to stress how difficult it was for a nation like Wales to win away from home. So this was a very important win. Must be said against modest opposition, but nevertheless, it was never easy for Wales. First match, first win. We come to the fall of 1980. Around this time, Soviet Union has started their campaign. They defeat Iceland home and away. Wales have their second match, the first one at home at Cardiff at Ninian Park on October 15th against Turkey. And it's another comfortable win for the Welsh, again 4-0.
4-0, yeah.
Yeah, we have Brian Flynn scoring in the 18th minute with a long range shot. Leighton James scores a penalty kick in the 38th minute. He'll score the fourth one in the 85th minute as well. And also Ian Walsh will score in the 78th minute. Two matches, two wins, and more importantly, good for the goal
A
difference.
healthy goal difference,
8-0
yeah.
goal difference. Yeah. At this point, they're just ahead of the Soviet Union on goal difference, but Czechoslovakia has not started their campaign yet.
That's right, yeah. Well, I remember quite well Czechoslovakia and the Soviet Union were playing catch up with us very much so early doors. I remember the Soviet Union, I think they had 5 games left to play at the start of the 81-82 season. So they'd just been picked up points nice and steadily, really, throughout the group. But they were almost like a machine. They were exceptional at home and they picked up points, away draws to us and ourselves in Czechoslovakia. And then they beat the two, sort of the minnows, if you like, because Turkey were a very pretty poor side in that campaign, and as they were for much of the 80s. But the Soviet Union were just that little bit better than ourselves and Czechoslovakia. So we felt it was probably going to be between us and the Czechs for second place.
The first important clash between the rivals is on November 19th, 1980 at Cardiff at Ninian Park as Wales take on Czechoslovakia. Now, this match marked the debut of Jeremy Charles, who is the son of Mel Charles and the nephew of John Charles. Wales win this match, this important match. They scored a winner in the 9th minute through David Giles.
Yeah,
Mickey Thomas crossed from the left side,
it was
and
exceptional work from Mickey. Yeah.
yeah, and Giles knocked it in. So it was a 1-0 win. Wales take leadership of the group with their third straight win, and again, another clean sheet, more importantly. After this win over Czechoslovakia, there must have been a genuine belief that Wales do have a chance to qualify, I imagine.
After that game, yes, because obviously the first two matches were fairly routine victories. The Czechs were a big step up in class in terms of ability, and technically they'd always been a very good side as they showed on this night. It was quite an end-to-end game. I remember we obviously, like as we said, some good work from Mickey Thomas and quite an easy finish for David Giles. We restricted the Czechs to not many chances at all. Whilst it was a free-flowing game, we did create an awful lot of chances and should have actually won by a lot more than a single goal. The Czechs hit the post near the end, but apart from that, Di Daves didn't really have a meaningful save to make. We missed 2 or 3 good chances, and it could easily have been another 3 or 4 nil victory. So I think that did put down a marker. Would have made the Czechs and the Soviet Union take notice that we're serious about this campaign, and we were very hopeful about obviously going to Spain in 1982. Yeah, that was a very significant victory against one of the best, well, one of the better teams in the group and one of the better teams in Europe.
So we come to the calendar year 1981. Ahead of the qualifier against Turkey, there's a friendly against the Republic of Ireland at Dublin in February 24th, 1981, and Wales win this match 3-1. So there's some confidence within the squad. The first qualifier of this year is on March 25th. Wales travel to Turkey, to Ankara. They defeat Turkey 1-0 with Carl Harris scoring in the 66th minute. So this is fourth straight win. Again, a clean sheet. Wales are seemingly running away with the group. However, like you mentioned, the Soviets and Czechoslovakia have not played as many matches yet. Nevertheless, there's growing confidence with the team winning consecutive matches. What was the mood at this point going into the second half of the qualifiers?
Well, after this, we felt it's pretty much ours to lose because the Soviets and the Czechs were likely to take points off each other. And there was always a chance that they could, one of or two could drop points in someone like Turkey and Iceland. Well, it was a flawless start, and we couldn't have asked for any more. So I'm a bit of believer that I'd rather have the points on the board than games in hand. Perhaps I probably felt a bit differently back then because you always felt the Soviet Union weren't going to drop too many points in the campaign. It was just a case of hoping the Czechs would drop a little bit more than those in the remaining games. But after such a flawless start, we felt it was ours to mess up really, and there was no reason why we couldn't have qualified. And to be fair, we should have qualified. But that's obviously a topic for a little bit later. But yeah, I was going to say confidence was absolutely sky high, and we really felt this time we were going to Spain, and I'm sure a lot of fans were looking at booking flights already.
Their next two matches, Czechoslovakia defeat Turkey away from home, and they defeat Iceland 6-1. So they're just behind Wales at this point. In the meantime, in May, Wales take part in the home championship. They defeat Scotland 2-0 on May 16th at Swansea with the Ian Walsh double. 3 days later, at Wembley, they hold England to a scoreless tie. This is just before the key match against the Soviet Union. On May 30th at Wrexham, Wales host the Soviet Union. This is a Soviet Union. Some familiar faces: Rinat Dasaev in goal. You mentioned the Dinamo Tbilisi contingent of Tenji
Taventi.
Sulakveridze and the captain Alexander Chivadze, who would win the Cup Winners' Cup that year,
That's right.
that
Yeah,
season. Yeah,
he was an exceptional sweeper, and they also had guys like David Kipiani, who was a very very
exact.
good
Yes.
playmaker. Rama Shengeli was a very good forward alongside Oleg Blokhin. The other guy called Vitaly Daraseli was another one. Who was so that the core of the team was very much Georgian, but Dasayev went on to be was an exceptional keeper and went on to be one of the best in Europe, if not the world, at that time.
And this match would end as a scoreless tie to keep each team's hopes still alive. So at this point, Wales, with 5 matches, were leading the group with 9 points, and Czechoslovakia had one less match and 6 points, 3 points behind. After the scoreless tie against the Soviets, at the time, was it considered a drop point or was it seen as a good result against such a top side?
I'd say good results. As you said, they were an exceptional side, and they were just a little bit better than the rest of the teams in that group. So I think most teams, and especially Wales, if we were offered 9 points, as it was 2 points for a victory in that era, if we were offered 9 points, have a possible 10 from the first 5 games with 5 clean sheets as well, I think we'd have snapped your hand off. So we were wise enough to know we were not playing Turkey or Iceland. We were playing that side with some of the players you've named and many others too, like Vladimir Besanov was a very good defender, Leonard Buriak, Sergei Baltacha. There was such a strong Ukrainian and Georgian contingent in that team. And a lot of those teams had quite a lot of success in Europe and went on to have a little bit more success over the coming years. So we knew what we were up against, and I think with the taking a point, we realised we were playing a side who were just that little bit better than the others in the group. No, so I don't think there's any too much despondency. Obviously, we wanted to win because I think a win would have all but taken us there because they'd have given us margin for error in later games. But without doubt, we were happy with a draw.
Now we come to the season 1981-82 and the last phase of the qualification campaign. This is the time when the wheels come off.
Absolutely, yeah.
So the first match, the first qualifier, is on September 9th. It's an away trip to Prague. Czechoslovakia defeats Wales 2-0, where we have Byron Stevenson scoring an own goal by deflecting Panenka's free kick, which struck the post and then rebounded and struck Di Davies into the
Davis, yeah.
net. So this is in the 26th minute. In the 68th minute, Werner Lika doubled the lead. Wales had given up their first goals and lost their first match. Nevertheless, they were still group leaders with 6 matches. But Czechoslovakia were getting closer. And as you mentioned, Soviet Union had only played 3 matches thus far.
Yeah.
Between this match and their next match, the Soviet Union win 2 matches, home and away against Turkey, and actually take leadership of the group with 5 matches. And at this point, the Soviets, Czechoslovakia, and Wales each have 9 points at this point at October, when we come to this match against Iceland. For this match against Iceland, it's on October 14th at home at Swansea. This is the match they really should have won. So Wales takes the lead through Robbie James in the 24th minute, but Asgeir Sigurvinsson of Iceland, who would become a star with Stuttgart. He had a
That's
spell
right, yeah.
at Bayern Munich and Standard Liège as well, I believe.
So he was
Yeah.
their standout player, yeah.
Yeah. So he tied the match in the 41st minute, and the first half is tied. We come early in the second half. Alan Curtis heads in the second goal for Wales in the 54th minute. However, in the 61st minute, Sigurvinsson scores again, and this match ends as a 2-2 tie. Now, Wales, after 7 matches, are leading the group with 10 matches, but again, the other teams have games in hand. Was failing to defeat Iceland at home ultimately Wales's undoing in this campaign?
100%, yeah, because they had a couple of standout players, as you mentioned, Sigurvinsson, and they also had Ida Gudjonsson's father, Arno Gudjonsson, who had a fairly decent playing career himself with the likes of Anderlecht in Belgium. They were useful on the break, but they were a side we should have beaten fairly comfortably. Again, we created an awful lot of chances, didn't put any away, but also we were 1-0 up, and we had the infamous floodlight failure, which most fans have heard about. We were 1-0 up. Unfortunately, the floodlights failed at the Vetch Field in Swansea. So both sides had to go off the pitch, and we lost our momentum when we came back. Iceland got back into the game, and we scored a good goal not long after. Unfortunately, not long after that, again, they scored a goal on the break, and there's one or two chances either end. But I think we knew then, as you said, the wheels had come off well and truly. They were a side we should have beaten. The likes of Czechoslovakia were not really going to drop points against them, as with the Soviet Union, because we knew from the 81-82 season that was going to be the crucial part, because we had the two hardest games, had 3 games left. We had the two hardest games in the Czechoslovakia away and the Soviet Union away. Not beating Iceland was fatal to our chances, really, because we knew the last game was going to be by far the hardest of the lot. So, and obviously beating Iceland would have put us in Spain. And so, because we missed that opportunity, there was a lot of despondency around the country. So I think we knew our chances, whilst they were still very much possible, we knew really it wasn't going to happen. I think in our heart of hearts, we accepted we were not going to make it.
There was some little hope as the Soviets defeated Czechoslovakia a couple of weeks later. So at this point, the Soviets are leading the group with 6 matches and 11 points. Wales is just behind, 7 matches, 10 points, just ahead of Czechoslovakia, 7 matches and 9 points. However, the Welsh there had to face the Soviets for their last match, and it was always going to be the tall order. So
Yeah,
on November 18th at Tbilisi, the Soviets hosted Wales, convincingly defeated the Welsh 3-0. Vitali Daraselia scored in the 13th minute. Just a few minutes later, 18th minute, Oleg Blokhin scored the second goal. And at this point, the match was over. The qualification hopes were over. And for good measure, Yuri Gavrilov scores a third goal in the 64th minute. It was all over for Wales. However, there was one last match left on November 29th, and the Czechs tied the Soviets, just edged ahead of Wales with 10 points, but better goal difference,
yeah.
and qualified. Was there a belief at the time, since Czechoslovakia and the Soviet Union were two Eastern Bloc nations, they
Absolutely.
may have played a diplomatic tie for the Czechs to go through? Was there ever such a belief at the time?
There was a little bit of talk about it, but there may have been a gentleman's agreement between the Soviets and Czechoslovakia. But at the end of the day, we only had ourselves to blame. We dropped 1 or 2 points we probably shouldn't have done. I mean, there's no shame losing to Czechoslovakia or the Soviet Union. I mean, the Soviets put an absolute masterclass against us in Tbilisi, and we just were never in that game whatsoever. So obviously we were relying on the Soviets doing us a favour against Czechoslovakia. But there's an English referee as well in that game called Clive White. I'm sure there's fair play. I don't believe there's anything dubious going on. I think it was just a case of we just weren't good enough, and it was not the first time I said that, not the last time I said that. Had we beaten that Iceland at home, we wouldn't have had to worry about asking the Soviets for a favour. So I'm a believer. You've got to do your own stuff first in football and not rely on others, because you can't really rely on favours in football. Yeah, it was disappointing. We were all obviously rooting for the Soviet Union, but we weren't overly surprised at the result, because the Czechs were a decent side themselves, and they were probably capable of getting a draw against the Soviet Union, because they had some good players of their own, like Nahoda, Panenka, Vizek, and 1 or 2 others who were still there from the 1976 side, and a younger generation coming through. So I think Marian Masny, who's a very good winger as well, he was still an integral part of that Czechoslovakian team. I think bottom line was the two teams were just technically better than us, just more skillful than us, and perhaps a little bit more experience. And streetwise, we just fell short when it mattered.
Let's look at the qualifiers on balance and the aftermath. Initially, there was defensive solidity and no goals conceded until September 1981. But after that, the Welsh conceded 7 goals in 3 matches. What went wrong?
I think we just up against better sides, and obviously perhaps better coaches as well. The Soviets had Konstantin Beskov as their coach. He'd had an awful lot of success in the Soviet Union, and he was integral to this rebuild and the success they went on to have it later on in the 80s when Lobanovsky took over. So Beskov won an awful lot of trophies in the Soviet Union with the likes of Spartak Moscow and Dynamo Moscow. So again, a bit of a wily old coach. Mike England, for all the good things he did, and it's been written in an awful lot of autobiographies since. He was tactically not the greatest. As a motivator, he was very, very good, but tactically he was not the greatest, and that's where he fell short. And Czechoslovakia also had Dr. Joseph Venglos as their coach, who had an awful lot of success in Europe and in other parts of the world. So I think a couple of those campaigners as coaches, I think that helped the Soviets and the Czechs pippers. I'd say because our back four was generally the same throughout the tournament. So, we had Joey Jones, who'd won everything at Liverpool. Kevin Ratcliffe would go on to have a lot of success at Everton. Leighton Phillips and Paul Price. That was our regular back four. So it was pretty much the same side from start to finish in the campaign. We had probably a core group of 14 to 15 players. But we probably didn't have a lot of cover at the back. So if one or two lads were just a little bit out of form, we probably didn't have anyone to replace them. So I think that came into it as well in terms of the strength and depth in the defence, and also Neville Southall wasn't on the scene then, so he wasn't there to put a bit of pressure on Di Davis maybe. So I think that's where one of the reasons we fell a little bit short qualifying for Spain in '82.
Which players do you think stood out and which players were deemed as scapegoats?
Yeah, there's no real scapegoats. I think we just accepted there were two better teams in the group. I mean, the side consisted of some of the players I mentioned. Peter Nicholas was starting to come through. Kevin Ratcliffe was starting to come through. They were two lads in their early 20s, so they were big pluses. Ian Rush, Ian Walsh were starting to make their names, as with Jeremy Charles. So we're going to be well stocked forwards. Yeah, a lot of players had good campaigns. Brian Flynn had a good campaign. Mickey Thomas, David Giles were all scoring goals from midfield. So we had a lot of areas covered. It was just perhaps a little bit of strength and depth here and there. We were just a little bit lacking, and perhaps a little bit of experience as well, because Rush hadn't really made his name with Liverpool yet. And Kevin had probably just had a full season under his belt. But there was certainly a lot of optimism going into future campaigns. It was just this campaign's probably just perhaps one campaign too soon for some of the players I've mentioned.
So was there still confidence on Mike England?
Yeah, I believe so. Yes, it was. We were not going to get a top international coach. So if you look at England, had Ron Greenwood as their manager at the time, who was a good manager in his own right. But again, you wouldn't be classed as one of England's top managers when you had the likes of Brian Clough, who missed out on the job. So yeah, in terms of Mike England, yeah, I think we're very happy with sort of the work he'd done. John Chossack, as I said, was still doing great things at Swansea, so we were never really going to entice him on sort of the money we paid. We weren't regular qualifiers, so we weren't in a position so we wouldn't be too critical about a manager who we just lost to a good Czechoslovakian team on goal difference.
There was a belief that better things were to come with the emergence of the young players like Ian Rush, etc.
That's right, yeah. And also at the end of the following home nations in '82, and obviously Neville Southall was blooded then, and he went on to be one of the best keepers, if not the best keeper in the world for most of the '80s and into the '90s. So we had the nucleus of a team, players at the right age who were just coming into their prime, and we thought probably the '84 Euros, we thought we'd be in with a good shout, albeit we'd probably likely be ranked amongst the third seeds, which in those days as well, you only had one team qualifying, making it very, very difficult. So you were always going to get one top European side in there. But yeah, we felt optimistic going into future campaigns. It was just probably this one was just a little bit too soon into Mike England's tenure in terms of just getting us over the line.
Yeah, now zooming out, why didn't Wales build up on this and instead stagnated for decades?
the 80s was really full of near misses because this one was a typical one. 84, we also missed out in heartbreaking circumstances because we had a very good Yugoslavian team, a decent Bulgarian team, and a bit of a Berdansk in Norway. Again, we were actually even closer because we were relying on the last game Yugoslavia against Bulgaria. I think we needed that game to end in a draw or a narrow Bulgaria victory for us to go through. But I remember Yugoslavia scored in something like the 93rd minute, and had the referee blown his whistle 20 seconds earlier, we'd have been there. But we blew it, unfortunately, against Yugoslavia in Cardiff when we conceded quite a late goal there. We were always knocking on the door of major tournaments. We just couldn't get over the line. 86, we lost out in heartbreaking manner to Scotland when a controversial penalty was given to Scotland. 88, we felt we'd come full circle really because this was similar to this 82 campaign we've been discussing when we had Denmark and Czechoslovakia in the group, and again we had the two hardest games we played last away to the Czechs and the Danes, and I think we just needed a draw for one of those two games and we didn't get a single point. So we felt we'd come full circle then as in not being quite good enough to get a point away from home against one of the top sides, which is what you need to do. So then obviously it was littered with a few campaigns where we weren't even close in some more recent years.
And looking back, it's surprising how close Wales got to qualify this time. And just goal difference was all it took for them to be eliminated in such dramatic circumstances after such a bright start. Was there any mention made that Wales actually got even more points than England, who were one of the worst qualifiers for this
They
World Cup? I
were
think they got 9 points, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah.
they lost three games. I remember,
Yeah.
obviously,
Yeah.
so they got a draw here and there. So yes, I think, like I said, 10 points. I think you make a good, exceptional point that 10 points would have got us out of most groups, and that's probably the same we can say for future campaigns where we've now missed out. But there were some sides who were probably worse than us in qualifying, but they sort of knew how to get over the line. I remember Scotland in a fairly weak group against a Portugal side that wasn't that great then, Sweden. Northern Ireland qualified on probably, I can't remember all their results off the top of my head, but they probably qualified on a similar number of points. And yeah, you could probably argue we were in the toughest group as well. Perhaps apart from the Republic of Ireland's group, who had Holland, Belgium, France, it was probably the toughest group we could have asked for. So we overall we did give a good account of ourselves, but after such a good start, there was such a disappointment that we just need to win one of the last four games, really. Actually, after winning the first four, shouldn't have been beyond us, but unfortunately it was. So yeah, very frustrating because over the 8 games we gave a decent account of ourselves. We just come up short against the very best sides in the group.
In closing, historically, how are these 1982 World Cup qualifiers viewed by Welsh fans and football historians alike?
I think we're pretty philosophical about it. As I said a few times, we were there was two very good teams in the group. Soviets were exceptional. Us and the Czechs, it probably wasn't a great deal between us. So it came down to the head-to-heads between us, and they just pipped us in that. And that was the same for future campaigns, really. We just always had one or two teams who were just that little bit better than us, and we always just fell that little bit short. But at the same time, we probably did have enough quality to do a little bit better and at least get over the line in one or two of those qualifying tournaments. But the 82 one, I think Mike England was given he was given quite a lot of credit because overall it was we made a good start, just didn't have a very good finish. But we felt there was some good things going on, and there were a lot of good players pushing through to give us that little bit of strength in depth for future. That hopefully stood us in good stead for future tournaments.
With that, I would like to thank you for your participation in this interview
Uh,
and to remind everyone to please read the main blog article as well for more detail. The link is included in the video upload description along with our respective contact information. So, Garrett, thanks you once again and hope to continue these discussions on Welsh football history.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Johan.
Thank you.